I will start with the fundamental notion of which Sri Aurobindo brings about evolution and the Vedic or Vedantic vision, which is important for us, and we will be looking into it this time. We speak of the evolution of life in matter, the evolution of mind in matter, but evolution is a word which merely states the phenomenon without explaining it. For there seems to be no reason why life should evolve out of material elements or mind out of living form, unless we accept the Vedantic solution that life is already involved in matter and mind in life, because in essence matter is a form of veiled life, life is a form of veiled consciousness. And then there seems to be little objection to a further step in the series and the admission that mental consciousness may itself be only a form and a veil of higher states which are beyond mind. It's quite reasonable, logical, is it not so? If we are evolving out of material consciousness into the vital, from the vital into the mental, as humanity represents the mental level of consciousness, then the possibility that we evolve even further, beyond mind. Involution. What is interesting about this statement, that if we do not accept this vision of involution, that the consciousness is already involved in matter, that's why it evolves out of matter. There is a packed consciousness with all the grades which have to be unfolded gradually. So there is another beautiful statement from the later writings. The involution of a superconscious spirit in inconscient matter is the secret cause of this visible and apparent world. The key word of the Earth's riddle is the gradual evolution of a hidden, illimitable consciousness and power out of the seemingly inert yet furiously driven force of insensible nature. Earth life is one self-chosen habitation of a great divinity, and his aeonic will is to change it from a blind prison into his splendid mansion and high heaven-reaching temple. The kingdom of heaven on earth is his aim. So I will start with the Vedic vision, because it is from there that Sri Aurobindo draws all his inspiration, all his vision. And it's also important for us to understand that Sri Aurobindo is not some kind of a new age personality who created his philosophy out of some fancy way of thinking. He is grounded deeply in the historical consciousness, in the Vedic vision, in the Vedantic knowledge, in the Gita. All his Purna yoga of what we call integral yoga is the yoga of the Gita, first of all. We do not know that, but once we start studying it, we can see the parallels, and we will see where the inspiration is coming from. So I will start from the beginning, the creation. So the creation is described in many ways in the Vedas and in other scriptures. It starts with nothingness. There was nothing at the beginning. There was no being or no being in the beginning. There was only darkness covered by darkness, or there was the spirit at the beginning. The self was at the beginning. The Atman, the Lord, was there alone. So either it starts from the darkness or nothingness, even death. There is a description that the beginning of the creation starts with death. Death alone was there, but there was nothing to consume, and death was hungry. So the beginning starts from that vision. But whatever the beginning, there is always an understanding that the darkness is not our initial stage, as it were, is not our origin. It's something which meets us on the way, as it were. As Sri Aurobindo would say, night is not our beginning. We come to her from a supernal light. By light we live, and to the light we go. This is our origin, our support, and our aim. But the passage is the night on the way. And we will see how it came into being. So the beginning. At the beginning was the self. I start with this beginning, not from the darkness. This is the self alone. And you see around this darkness, it's something which is not. He was alone. He looked around and did not find anybody else except himself. Wherever he looked, he saw only himself. There was nobody else. Only him everywhere. He said, I am. But there was no other name to say, for he was alone. He couldn't say who he was. He could say only, I am. And that was the full stop. I am what I am. As you remember from the Bible. He was not happy. He wanted another. I skipped the whole passage in between, which is very valuable for psychologists, about he got afraid that he is alone. And that's Shatapatha Brahmana would say that it's true, the one who is alone is always afraid. Then he thought, whom I am afraid of if I alone am? And then fear vanished. And then the explanation follows, fear always comes from another. Fear comes from another. What is fear? Fear is shrinking back to yourself. So I skip all that very valuable material just to go straight to where we want to go. He was not happy. He wanted another. What does it mean? Why was he not happy? He was looking for another already, and he didn't find him, and then he became kind of anxious. He wanted to experience himself in a different way. As Mother would say, he has an experience of total identity, the bliss of identity he has, but he doesn't have the bliss of unity. He doesn't have that recognition of himself in the other form. He didn't see himself totally manifested with whom he could have the relations. This is Brihadaranyaka's and Taittiriya's. Taittiriya myth is quite interesting in that sense. He so kamayata, he desired, bahusyam, may I be many. Satapo tapyata, and he concentrated his efforts. Satapos taptva, and having concentrated his consciousness, idam sarvam asarjata, he cast out of himself all this. All this is the world. Tatsrishtva, having created this, tad evanu pravishat, he entered it. Now look at this. He cast out of himself this world, and then he enters it. Tad anupravishya, and having entered it, satchatyacha bhavat, it became that and this. Niruktam cha, it became expressed and not expressed. Nilayanam cha, it became located and not located. Vijnanam cha, it became known and unknown. That one became both, known and unknown, located and unlocated, expressed and not expressed. Satyam Chanritam cha satyam abhavata. And the truth became true and not true. Profound. Such a small text, everything about the creation. But we have to see how it came into being. Now, Sri Aurobindo asks, why should Brahman, who is perfect, absolute, infinite, needing nothing, desiring nothing, at all throw out force of consciousness to create in itself these worlds of forms? What's the reason? Perfect, alone, totally in bliss, happy, not happy totally, was unhappy, wanted another for some reason. Why? If then, being free to move or remain eternally still, to throw itself into forms or retain the potentiality of form in itself, it indulges its power of movement and formation, it can be only for one reason, for delight. There can't be any reason for creation. The delight is the reason to cast. He cast himself into form for delight, for additional ananda, as Mother would say. He wanted to get an additional circuit of ananda. He had himself totally knowing and totally blissful within himself, omnipotent, omniscient, omnipresent, and has all the delight, but then he understood, or something in him was searching for additional delight through unity and not through identity. The unity he never had.
If he was by himself alone and he had this tremendous knowledge and feelings, isn't it like he wanted to tell a story and he needed somebody to listen to him?
Yes, he wanted to listen to himself, the story of himself.
It's not fun to listen
Absolutely.
to.
No, it's very fun. You listen to as if it is not you. You listen to the story as if it is not yours, your own story. It's a profound and great delight to have another. Huh? Sharing.
Yeah.
Himself with himself. Sharing his own. He could never share. He never had an opportunity. He was only himself alone. Now he can share his own findings about himself to himself who is not totally himself. Is it not convincing? Convincing? Just looking at you, yes.
Hey Jim, he had this infinite capacity for delight, and so manifesting and increasing his delight is just sort of a natural inclination.
Right.
To keep growing, more and more delight.
By the way, this delight is viewed as the emanation of conscious being. This consciousness, so being, consciousness and bliss, Sat Chit Ananda. Yes? The more we are conscious, the more we are blissful. We are conscious of our being, we become more and more blissful. That's the only bliss, to be conscious of your existence. We are looking always for something else. We are not looking for the existence, for the being. We are looking for having, for making, for doing many more things, for experiences. But if we are just looking, if we are concentrated on our being, on ourselves, with the consciousness which is perceiving it, that will be already a blissful state. Bliss is already inherent in us.
One of the most amazing things seems to me that knowing that this delight, this ananda, is everywhere, always, all-pervasive, and that there's this adventure consciousness too, that it's so amazing that we can have even an infinitesimal moment where we don't feel this ananda, but it's everywhere. And the fact that we don't know it is such an astonishing miracle, in a way.
Yeah, something in us blocks it away.
Yes.
And Sri Aurobindo also says about this. Somebody objected to him saying, where is this bliss? It's only suffering. The whole world is full of suffering, no bliss. And he says, it's not true. Just look carefully. Even people who are very devastated by disease or anything situation, they grab this life, they hold on to it, they want to come back. Why? It's full of bliss. We don't look at the bliss as something outstanding. We're looking for sufferings because it just stands out and we can see that like a shadow. We see shadows. We don't see light. We are not looking for it. Whenever it is good, it's good. It's fine. Yeah? But when it is bad, oh, listen, I will tell you everything about it. So we are concentrated on this negative part more than when we are not appreciating what is given to us. That's why we do not see it everywhere. But it is everywhere, all the time.
Glass half empty, half full. Glass half full or empty?
Right. Half glass or empty or half full. It depends how you see it. So, the Supreme, says the Mother, and I have to quote this, that Supreme alone decided to exteriorize himself, objectivize himself in order to have the joy of knowing himself in detail, to be able to see himself. He never could see himself. Now we see himself in all these forms. I look into your eyes, I see him everywhere. It is he who is looking at me from your eyes. And that's what Sri Aurobindo says in one of the aphorisms. You see, they are ready to love God, but they don't love humanity. Who do they love, actually? The God is here within us. How can we love some abstraction if we do not see him here within us? The first thing in himself which he exteriorized was the knowledge of the world and the power to create it, which is called Chit Shakti, consciousness power, or Chit Tapas. This consciousness force, this knowledge, consciousness and force, began its work. And in the Supreme Will there was a plan. And the essential principle of this plan was the expression of both the essential joy and the essential freedom, which seemed to be the most interesting feature of this creation. Essential joy and essential freedom. We have two fundamental rights for joy and freedom. And we are always fighting for these two. Have you noticed? In every society. Freedom and joy. There's nothing else we are fighting for. Now, how would you create this world with another in it if you alone are? How would you do it? Some thoughts. How can you create other perspective, other point of view? Something which would look at you as if it didn't know you before, and then it will discover you or divinity in you. How can one do it? You alone are everywhere. You look here and there and everywhere, you. How can you fool yourself in a way that you will become another and have relations with yourself as if you didn't know yourself?
With your imagination.
Imagination. This is for us to imagine, yes, that's what we are trying to do now. There is nothing else that we can do, only imagine, yes. But imagine more, wow! What would you do, being alone, to make somebody else as yourself? Imagination would... Okay.
Identify yourself.
Huh?
Identify
yourself with another. How? Through what means?
Talking about like taking the rib. In the Bible, they take the rib and he makes
Adam and Eve, yes, takes a rib. Yes.
Yeah, take a part of yourself to make somebody.
Take a part of yourself and make somebody. How?
Projection.
Projection what? Yeah, develop thought. It's an amazing thing.
If it's just I is there, on top of me or behind me, is there a creator?
You are the creator. There is no other creator.
I'm all.
You are all. There is nothing else, only
Well, then I
you.
can create. If I'm the creator,
Do
I
it.
can create.
Tell me how.
With my mind, with my energy.
Don't have mind yet.
How can I be the creator?
So what would you do? You have consciousness. You perceive yourself as one. Omnipowerful, omnipresent, omnipotent.
So you perceive yourself as two.
You perceive yourself as one.
It's two. To get a companion, you perceive yourself as two.
Then that's split personality.
Yeah, you're clear. So you perceive yourself already. Perception is the second. There's some mirror there within you who knows. You know yourself already. You are identical to yourself. You, through knowledge by identity, you know that it is you without really looking elsewhere for yourself. You know inherently that it is you because consciousness is a part of your being. And that consciousness perceiving you is bliss, eternal bliss, which you are. But how would you make somebody else with whom, or many, how would you become many?
I don't know how.
You manifest it.
Could it be that I am, however, these are the pieces of what I am, all these attributes of who I am. So every single thing is part of me. And I'm separating those out and I'm identifying and reflecting back in what is me.
Right. There are many I ams, and all of these I ams is he. But you used one word which is essential for now. Separate himself. How can you separate yourself? You have...
Right, because if I point, and I said this to you before, if I point to Vladimir, am I pointing to Vladimir?
We are separate and we are
Right.
one. We are one inside and we are separate outside. He separated himself, he made a gap somewhere. This gap is essential. We never think about it, but without this gap he would never become many. He would not have many focal points. He would never see himself as another. So how did he do this? And this is quite interesting. Here we come to the next slide. The eternal night. Night, says the Veda, was born out of the shining truth of the supreme power. From the night, the waters of the inconscient came into being. And from the waters of the inconscient, the time was born, the creator of all that moves. Separation. He had to forget himself. He had to deny his own consciousness. He had to become unaware of himself. To create separation. Out of himself he cast a luminous shadow, all these worlds, from the superconscient to the inconscient, from the light to total darkness. Gradually denying himself, withdrawing his supreme knowledge from his supreme power, becoming unaware of these worlds as himself. So he created the foundation of total forgetfulness. There, he doesn't know himself anymore. He is that power, but he doesn't know that it is him. The infinite, eternal night. There are beautiful lines from Savitri. In the enigma of the darkened vasts, in the passion and self-loss of the infinite, the contradiction founds the base of life. The eternal, the divine reality has faced itself with its own contraries. Being became the void, and conscious force nescience, and walk of a blind energy. And ecstasy took the figure of world pain. Mother speaks about 4 supreme emanations, which came from the original, from the origin, from the supreme. And these are 4 first emanations: consciousness in light, bliss, truth, and life. And they were given freedom to create whatever. They were the supreme. And instead of connecting to the supreme and among themselves, they started to create freely whatever they wanted. And gradually, as Mother says, they fell into their opposites because they lost the connection with the supreme. They thought they are supreme. They didn't think about themselves as emanations of the supreme. They deviated from the divine step by step and gradually fell into their opposites. And on the picture you can see the first emanation stands there and falls into that sign below, which is darkness. The bliss slowly falls into suffering. The truth falls into falsehood. We don't see it very clearly. And the life, eternal life, he never could die. He was always there. For the first time, he could die. Life turned into death. So the foundation of our darkness is these 4. These are 4 original asuras, as it were.
So it strikes me that for most of the 20th century, when the scientists looked back 13.7 billion years ago and saw nothing but a void, unconsciousness, no delight, they said, that's the truth. That's where we start from. But in the last 20 years, what they say now is the number 1 mystery in science now is consciousness. And just the last 10 years, some of the world's greatest scientists are saying it must have been there at the beginning. And what they're saying now is we've seen it unfold.
Right.
With amphibians and mammals and primates is becoming more and more. Could this be where we came from?
Right.
Yeah.
This is the beginning of new thinking. And they speak about the intelligent design, that all the forms which emerged and evolved in this evolution could not evolve if there would be no one vision plan of consciousness. The slightest modulation or modification would change the whole outcome of the evolution. So how, with what precision the consciousness works from the matter, how it emerges out into this beautiful world. So these are the 4, if we identify them with the Indian tradition, it would be Chit, Ananda, Vijnana, and Sat. Sat, Chit, Ananda, and Vijnana. These are 4 adityas, or 4 transcendental emanations of the Supreme. The being which turned into death, life, consciousness, which knew, by which he knew himself, bliss. But notice, everything falls from consciousness first. Consciousness turns into darkness and drags delight into suffering. And that drags truth into falsehood. And that becomes the foundation for the first death. Only then he could dare to die. Because otherwise he is mortal. How can he die? His major emanations made it possible for him to turn into the opposite. The fall of this, you remember in the Bible, Eve is trying the apple and offers it to Adam. This is the consciousness which offered Adam the fall. Otherwise they would never come down. It's quite interesting because symbols are the same in many religions. The consciousness is to fall first. Moreover, in the recovery of consciousness in savagery, first is the consciousness in light, that is Dyumatsena. Dyumatsena, first gift, first boon. Without Dyumatsena, the recovery is not possible. He gets the first boon from savage. Then bliss, Ashwapati, it is Ashwapati's boon. Then truth, 100 sons of savagery and Satyavan. And then life, Satyavan's life. Satyavan must live. You can see this vision. I was preparing this presentation for the previous time, but there was not many coming, so we were discussing other things.
Vladimir?
So it seems that consciousness that fell and resulted in the fall of bliss, truth, and light, that is a continual or extreme forgetting, right? That the whole aspect of forgetting continued till it became darkness. The
Absolutely.
the suffering.
If you look at these, what is darkness? Darkness is light, which disconnected itself from the Supreme. What is suffering? It is bliss, which does not have contact with the Supreme anymore.
Or it forgets its contact.
Forgets, or has no contact, forgets. It just separates itself. What is falsehood? Falsehood is nothing but truth, which has no contact with the Divine. Or what is death? Is a perpetual life which lost its contact with the Supreme. So there are beautiful also other verses here. Okay. Yes, it's from the Veda. When the first involution took place, when the light was turned into the darkness, says the Veda, the creation became as if unsteady. It could not sustain itself. Shithilam iva. Shithilam, some people know Sanskrit. Adhrubam iva. It was not holding itself. It was falling into pieces. It was falling into oblivion. It was disappearing because it was not in consciousness. The power, the being was there, but it was not in consciousness, so it was disappearing. It could not hold itself. So the Supreme Self had to enter and to support it from within. When he entered, as the Veda says, himself by himself, Atmanatmanam Abhisam Videsha, the creation became steady. There are beautiful lines in Savitri. When all was plunged in the negating void, non-being's night could never have been saved if being had not plunged into the dark. Non-being's night could never sustain itself. We would not have this separation, this gap anymore, because it would just dissolve. But the being is within, which holds the separation for us to work out our relations, his relations through us. So in the mother's story, and she speaks the story to the children of the ashram, so it's for children, so it's good for us. In order to repair the fall of the first emanations, the Supreme Mother, Aditi, delegated out of herself. Aditi is the Supreme Consciousness, his consciousness. Delegated out of herself the force of love, which has plunged into the darkness of the first creation. This force of love is our souls here. These are the sparks of that fire, which is here holding and evolving out of the darkness. In the Vedas it is Agni, the divine will, the first avatar who lay down and hid himself within the darkness, the immortal among mortals. It is because of his presence that everyone is evolving, seeking after the higher knowledge of the Supreme. Agni is the fire, the divine will in the midst, in the darkness, and we are the sparks of this fire. He is our Father. It is the first avatar with whom we all came down. Kirit Joshi, some of you may have known him. He was president of Auroville Foundation. He was the chairman of Auroville Foundation and a very dear friend. And he was telling the story to us and to children in the school about how this creation came into being. He said, once long ago, we signed the contract. We all, the souls, signed the contract with the divine. that we will come down and build for him, down this into the darkness, and build for him a mansion, a body, a house where he could live. And when we signed the contract, there was a small article there. While signing the contract, after signing the contract, we will forget about the content of this contract. So that's what happened to us. We plunged into the darkness to build for him a mansion, a house for the divine, but we forgot about what it was all about. But he says, until it is done, we will never be satisfied. We cannot stop until our mission is fulfilled. It's a nice story for children. So this is the first avatar. It's the picture by Huta, which Mother was meditating upon, and that's what she said. So she saw in her vision that when you come into the deepest darkness, to the bottom of the densest darkness, you will find this divine being there, emanating light. And it is because of that divine within the darkness that we all evolve and grow in consciousness. And she says, for the first time, this divine being opened its eyes. It is neither he nor she. It is just the being. So, the evolution. A soul of the divine is here slowly awaking out of its involution and concealment in the material inconscience. This is the definition of evolution in one sentence. What is evolving here? Is the divine presence in us. It is pushing forward. The whole evolution of our body, of our vital, of our mind. It is all evolving step by step because there is someone there. There are beautiful lines in Savitri. He sleeps in the atom and the burning star. He sleeps in man and God and beast and stone. Because he is there, the inconscient does its work. Because he is there, the world forgets to die. We had to already die long ago because we are not. And we forget to die because he is there. He is evolving. He is giving us this immortality within our mortality. And we go on, evolving from form to form, reincarnating from form to form. We are not living one life here. I believe you know that. We are living the many lives. It's just a journey.
But with all this beautiful universe and the story coming down, why in the world do we think we are the only ones? This little earth is hanging out there, and all these beautiful things, these beautiful stories from the Mother and Arvinda. Why does it only come to us? Are we sure?
I don't think we think that we are the only ones. I think there are many, Mother speaks about this, that there are many other worlds, there are many universes, there are many possibilities, there are infinite possibilities. Why should we think that we are the only ones? Well, we think many things, yeah?
Okay.
Altogether.
So there are more.
There are more. So the terrestrial evolutionary working, says Sri Aurobindo, of nature has a double process. There is an outward visible process of physical evolution with birth as its machinery, for which the evolved form of body housing its own evolved power of consciousness is maintained and kept in continuity by heredity. Through genome, through genes, we pass our changes. Through the body. We have children, children have children, and so on. All the changes we acquired through our life, through our application of consciousness, we are passing through adjustment in the genetic code to the future generations. This is what we know as Darwinian vision of evolution. It's constant adjustment in the body. There is at the same time an invisible process of soul evolution, with rebirth into ascending grades of form and consciousness as its machinery, reincarnation. The soul comes here, takes the body, makes changes. Changes are passed through genetic code, father to my grandchildren, great-grandchildren, and so on. And then we are all working with this, not only me, though, other people are coming, adding to it. And then, over some generations, I am embodied into that body which is prepared by me today. So I am jumping over many reincarnations into next, and then again, pushing it forward with all my development, with all my work of consciousness, I again come. So basically now, in time, I prepare my future incarnation in the future. I am preparing the body for myself in the future. And you also work for that body, for yourself and for me. We are all working for that future body. Quite interesting, yes? It's not one, it's double process. It's not one evolution. There are two evolutions simultaneously taking place. Soul is also evolving. Our soul, and we will speak about it now in a minute, what is evolving here from the spiritual side. It's not only the body which evolves. There is something else evolving behind it. That one who wanted to be many, he wanted to be real many, real, supreme many. It is also evolving there. So this is Sri Aurobindo's definition in the philosophical language. Some of you may like it, who are thinking philosophically. Brahman, says Sri Aurobindo, has projected in itself this luminous shadow of itself and has in the act begun to envisage itself and consider its essentialities in the light of attributes. He who is existence, consciousness, bliss, envisages himself as existent, conscious, blissful. He is not existence anymore, he is existent. He is. He has a focal point. He has the self. He has this I am. There are many I ams. He is existent. He knows himself now not as existence, as from the beginning, but as existent one. From that moment, phenomenal manifestation becomes inevitable. The unqualified chooses to regard himself as qualified. The one becomes the many. This is in the same story, but in a philosophical language, which is perfect. For the philosophers, just to look at this, you can say it's a perfect statement. Now, we will look at these levels. These are the levels of being in consciousness. Sat, existence, Chit, consciousness, Ananda, bliss, transcendental worlds. Vijnana, supermind, or the truth. Manas, mind, prana, life, annam, matter. You can see that the upper Satchitananda is reflected into the lower annam, prana, and manas. It's like two triangles of Sri Aurobindo's sign. Have you seen Sri Aurobindo's sign? David's tongue? This is exactly these two triangles crossing through Vijnana, which is the square. And he says about this distinctly that the square in between is the sign of the supermind, which is connecting the transcendental to this world. And what Sri Aurobindo tried to bring down is that supramental level of consciousness. We evolved to the mind level. Now the next stage is that supramental level, which will open us to the transcendental Satchitananda, to the infinite consciousness and bliss of our inner, unborn nature. Now, this is the spirit, and this is the self, the Atma, Sat Purusha, the divine self, Chaitanya Purusha, all conscious soul, Anandamaya Purusha, all blissful soul, Vijnanamaya Purusha, great soul, Manomaya Purusha, mental being, Pranamaya Purusha, vital being, and Annamaya Purusha, physical being. Now, when he chooses this focal point to be himself, to be I am, then he becomes this. On every level, he is represented by the self. He is perceiving himself now as a self, not as a spirit. Sri Aurobindo has a very beautiful quotation there, how this Atman becomes on every level something else in the evolutionary order, but we will not go into it. I want to finish our presentation with these few remarks here on his vision of his integral yoga. He speaks about double soul of man. And these are the experiences which are very important for us to know about. The true being may be realized in one or both or two aspects, the self or Atman and the soul or Antar-Atman, psychic being or Chaitya Purusha. Antar-Atman literally means inner self, inborn self. If Atman in general, Jivatma, is unborn self, unborn, never born, then Antaratma is inborn self in the heart of man. That's what we call the soul, which is here evolving. The unborn self never evolves. It stays and holds, projects this inborn self within us, which evolves. The difference is that one is felt as universal, our unborn self is felt as universal, the other as individual, supporting the mind, life and body. It is standing behind mind, life and body, helping them to evolve. When one first realizes the Atman, one feels it separate from all things, existing in itself and detached. When one realizes the psychic being, it is not like that. For this brings the sense of union with the divine and dependence upon it, and soul consecration to the divine alone, and the power to change the nature and discover the true mental, the true vital, and true physical being in oneself. So one is evolutionary, other is beyond evolution, supporting it. Two beloved ones. One is in love with the other one, always seeking the presence of the unborn self, always calling to the divine, always wanting to embody its power here in the mind, vital and physical. Both realizations are necessary for this yoga, for integral yoga. So, a new creation, what it should be, how it could come into being. So we covered two stages. First creation was the fall of the spirit, which laid out the field of its future manifestation. This body is not totally conscious. We know it. The stone is less conscious, the plants are more conscious, they can reproduce themselves, they live, they die, they are born from the seed. Then animal kingdom is more available to us in the body, and then a mental being. Human beings are even more conscious. But there are elements in us which are less conscious. And that is because of this first fundamental creation, the fall of the first emanations, which created for us a foundation for the body, for this less conscious being. So you notice that we are less conscious to the surface, more conscious inwardly. The more inward we move, the more conscious we are. The more to periphery we move, the less conscious we are. We are hardly conscious of our physical body. We do not know how it functions. What liver does, what kidneys do, we never think of it. Now we think about it objectively, but truly speaking, subjectively, we have no access to these processes. We are less conscious outside and more conscious inside. This is our double nature. We plunged into the darkness of this creation, into this foundation of the Spirit, which laid out the field for its future manifestation. All the levels of consciousness were unfolded gradually, creating all the worlds in the involutionary order, from light to darkness, from the superconscient to inconscient, from spirit to matter. The second creation. I especially chose this picture because this yellow, this gold within the dark blue, you see? This intrusion of the Spirit, he entered himself by himself. Was a plunge of the Supreme into the darkness of material inconscience, bringing the aspect of self into existence in terms of individual growth and realization. From this point, matter becomes animated and the evolution takes place. It's for the first time we have animated matter. What is animated matter? What is greenery? It lives. It reproduces itself. It becomes a food for us. There is a spirit within, energy within, which is generated by what? Someone, anima, the soul is within. The energy is within the matter. It lives. It goes on till psychic being is fully individualized and formed, and the instruments of its expression, body, life, and mind, are fully developed to embody the Spirit. So this is our double nature. On one side, we are absolutely unconscious of ourselves. We do not know ourselves from outside. We do not know others at all. We have no idea what is outside. We are just examining it with the outer mind. We are trying to make sense of what is happening outside. And there is something within us which is fully conscious. And all the grades. And there is a constant, ongoing quarrel or opposition between the inner and outer self within ourselves. We took on to ourselves this outer being to bring it back to its self-awareness. As Mother says, we came down for redemption of the fallen emanations. We are bringing them back to their divine origin through our evolution. So, the solution between these two, the inner and outer, is within the third creation. That's what Sri Aurobindo tried to do, is the supramental descent. The transcendental powers have to come down into our consciousness, which reconciles between the nature and the soul, enthrones the psychic being as the Lord of creation. He wanted to be many, as the Veda says. This is his many way to become, and gives it a direct access to the higher realms of being and consciousness, establishing the law of the Spirit in the whole nature. So the reconciliation between these two opposites, the totally conscious one within and totally unconscious one without, is to take place through the supramental stage, through the next stage in evolution. And that would be the solution. This is basically the whole information which I wanted to give you today. Maybe it's too much for you. I do not know. Some of you are first time listening to this material. But if you have some questions, we can make a pause, some discussion, and then I can introduce a few more things if we have enough space for it.